If every single time you have pork, you suffer an adverse reaction, you know that it is the pork. Whereas if you are having chicken, beef, and pork all on the same day, you have chicken for breakfast, pork for lunch, beef for dinner, and then you get an adverse reaction, you don't know which one of those foods it was. It could have been the chicken, it could have been the pork, or it could have been the beef. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in and welcome back to another Sunday Q&A. Today's question is with regard to the carnivore diet and ulcerative colitis. But before I start, you guys know the drill. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, ding, ding, ding. And if you don't want to watch the entire video, I will be including timestamps in the description so you can skip ahead to the section that you want. Now, onto the question. A few weeks ago, I had uploaded a video on ulcerative colitis and the carnivore diet and how it helped me. And on that video, I got a question from Zetzaro, and Zetzaro asks, I've not been doing carnivore long, about a week. I started since my current flare-up was irritating me. I don't get my UC is ulcerative colitis, too bad compared to many, I believe. I've had it 4 odd years and just done whatever while taking medicine. Last week, though, I tried to start carnivore diet after recommendations to me to do so. I wanted to use it as an elimination type diet to try to figure out what might affect me. Now, normally, my medicine will relieve most symptoms the next day. A couple weeks and I'll be fine, even if I don't take my medicine as regularly as I should. All this makes me look a bit bad, complaining about something others suffer worse from, but I would like some advice. During this week of carnivore, I've noticed my symptoms get better at all. Urgency, blood, very watery and regular. I'm only drinking water, but I eat beef, pork, chicken, eggs, and we tend to fry things in fatty pasteurized butter. I'm worried that something in carnivore diet is making me worse. What would you recommend I do here? Rotational diet of the meats themselves, day by day, week by week. It's coming up to Christmas, so I'd like to eat other things around then, but I was hoping to rule out some things before then. Am I being overeager or doing something wrong? Well, Zetzaro, that's a really good question, and with regard to it, I want to talk about elimination diets, rotation diets, and possible ways that you can troubleshoot with your carnivore diet. When it comes to an elimination diet, there are basically 2 phases to an elimination diet. Phase 1 is going to be the elimination phase, and that is going to last 2 to 3 weeks, and then phase 2, that is going to be the reintroduction phase. With regard to how exactly it works, basically you would want to pick a food that you know you have no negative reaction to, and you would want to stick to those types of foods for 2 to 3 weeks. Once you've done that for 2 to 3 weeks, then what you would want to do is start to reintroduce foods. But you don't want to reintroduce too much at once. What you're going to do is you want to pick one type of meat. So you could pick 1 cut of beef, 1 cut of chicken, whatever you are eating, and add that in, and every 2 to 3 days, what you want to do is see how you feel with that added food. If you notice that your symptoms do not come back after you consume that food, then add in another food. Do that for 2 to 3 days. If your symptoms don't come back, then add in another food, and continue to do that until you have a list of all the different foods that your body does not react poorly to. And if you do develop any type of symptomology when you are consuming foods that react poorly to your body, mark those down and you would want to eliminate those from your diet. Now, here's exactly what I would do. I know that for myself, top sirloin steak, when I consume it, I feel absolutely great. In fact, I'm going to be having it tomorrow. And one of the things with top sirloin steak is I have good energy, my digestion is good, I don't have any issues with regard to loose stool. So for me, if I was going to do an elimination diet, what I would want to do is I would start out with things like top sirloin because I know that they make me feel really good. Whereas things like honey garlic pork sausage, if I were to have honey garlic pork sausage right now, within 5 minutes, it would be in the toilet. So I know that for me, that food is going to react negatively to my body. So that is a food that I would want to stay away from. But figure out which foods you know respond well to your body and only consume those for 2 to 3 weeks. Then after 2 to 3 weeks, then you could slowly start to reintroduce more foods 1 at a time every 2 to 3 days. That is the elimination diet in a nutshell. With regard to the elimination diet, another thing worth noting is the method of your preparation when you are cooking your foods, because are you barbecuing it? Are you frying it? Are you baking it? Are you air frying it? Are you using a crock pot? For me, depending on the method that I use to cook, it is going to determine whether or not I get an adverse reaction. This is one thing that I noticed. Every time I've been doing my crock pot, when I do my sirloin tip roast, I noticed that I do get a little bit of loose stool, which is why I stopped consuming sirloin tipped roast. Now, one of the things, I don't know if it was due to the sirloin tip roast or because of the crock pot, because it only happened with the sirloin tip roast and only when I used it in the crock pot. Another thing worth noting, though, is when I did the sirloin tip roast in the crock pot, I do tend to put a lot of pecorino romano cheese. So it could be the crock pot, it could be the sirloin tip roast, or it could be the pecorino romano cheese. This is another reason why you want to pick one food at a time, because if you are combining multiple methods or multiple foods, you don't know what's going to be your trigger. For me personally, when I have the sirloin tip roast, I don't know if it's because I'm cooking it in a crock pot, I don't know if it's just the sirloin tip roast, or I don't know if it's because of all the pecorino romano cheese that I'm putting in there. So what you would want to do is stick to one food at a time. That's the elimination diet. Next is going to be the rotation diet. With regard to the rotation diet, the basic premise of the rotation diet is you want to eliminate reactive foods in your body, and you would want to rotate your foods to prevent the development of new negative reactions. And one of the ways that rotating your foods is greatly going to help is because when you do rotate your foods, you are going to know if a food is causing you a negative reaction, because if you are constantly changing up your food groups, then let's say you have chicken on Monday, pork on Tuesday, beef on Wednesday, fish on Thursday. If every single time you have pork, you suffer an adverse reaction, you know that it is the pork. Whereas if you are having chicken, beef, and pork all on the same day, you have chicken for breakfast, pork for lunch, beef for dinner, and then you get an adverse reaction, you don't know which one of those foods it was. It could have been the chicken, it could have been the pork, or it could have been the beef. So by doing it this way, what you would want to do with the rotation diet is pick one food from one food family, and you would want to stick to that food for a 24-hour period. After 24 hours, then you would move on to a second food family and consume only that for 24 hours. In terms of how often you should change up your rotation, me personally, I've always done a 4-day rotation or a 5-day rotation. I'm a big fan of the 4 and 5-day rotation just because it keeps it really, really simple. And at the time when I was doing those rotations, it was syncing up with my workouts. Right now, I'm doing a 7-day rotation, so it's pretty much every single day I'll consume something different, but a 4 and 5-day rotation would be optimal. One of the reasons why I really like to do a 4 or 5-day rotation and not something like a 2 or 3-day rotation is because your colon transit time, which is the amount of time that it takes for you to consume something and pop it out the back end, is going to be roughly 24 to 72 hours. So because it's 24 to 72 hours, ideally you would not want to consume the same food within that 24 to 72 hour time period, because it is going to be constantly in your system. So if you do consume a food within that 72 hour period and you consume it again, you won't know if it was that food that caused the reaction or another food, because you have multiple foods in your system at the same time. Now, one of the ways that you can measure your colon transit time and test to see how long it takes for food to pass through you is it's a 3-step test. What you're going to do is take either corn, beets, or activated charcoal, and you are going to consume that with a meal. The first step is you want to write down the date and time that you first took the activated charcoal, beets, or the corn. Step number 2, the very first time that you see one of those ingredients in your stool, you are going to mark down the date and time that you first saw it. Next, you are going to mark down the very last time that you saw it. So every single time you go to the washroom, make note of if you saw the corn, the beets, or the activated charcoal, and the very last time that you saw it, mark down the date and time. However long it takes from when you took it to the last time that you saw it, that is going to be your colon transit time. And ideally, when doing a rotation diet, you would not want to consume a food from the same family within that period of time. So if your colon transit time is 72 hours, then you would not want to consume food from the same family within that 72-hour period. And one of the things with regard to the different foods is there are many different ways in which you could break them down. One would be going by food families. So I'm going to give you a list of 6 different food families and ways that you can incorporate it into your diet. Let's say you wanted to do a 6-day rotation. You could do day 1, bovine family, and the bovine family would be things like beef, goat, sheep, lamb, buffalo. Day 2, that would be your fish day. When it comes to fish, there are a couple ways you can separate it. You could either do fish all in one group, or you could separate fish by different fish families. Me personally, when I do the rotation diet, I like to lump all fish in together because I only eat fish every 5 days when I'm doing a 5-day rotation, so it's not really too much of a concern to break down the separate families. But if you did want to break down the separate families, what you could do is do something like the codfish family and consume families from that food group. Then you could do things like salmon and trout family. You can do halibut and flounder family. There are a bunch of different fish families. Just go online, type in fish families, and you will have a giant list of them. Then day 3, you could do something like your pheasant family. Pheasant, that is going to be things like chicken, eggs, pheasant, quail, turkey, and switch it up, whatever ones you like. If you don't like chicken, try turkey. If you don't like turkey, try quail. If you don't like quail, maybe you like eggs. You already mentioned in your comment that you do like chicken and eggs, so that could be part of your pheasant day. Then day number 4, this could be your swine family. Swine family, this is going to be things like pig, hog, and also boar. So if you do enjoy those types of foods, you can incorporate those. I know that for me personally, I tend to stay away from the swine family because I don't do too well with pork. There are a few things, if I consume bacon in small amounts, that does not upset me whatsoever, so I will consume bacon in small amounts, but generally I stay away from pork because I do not respond well to it. And you mentioned that you were consuming pork, so I would recommend cutting that out first if you are trying a rotation or elimination diet and see how you feel. But anyway, back to the sample rotation diet. Once you've done your swine family, next, day 5, you can do something like mollusk family. With regard to mollusks, this is going to be things like clam, mussel, oysters, and also things like scallops. And then finally, day 6, you can use this as your waterfowl family. Your waterfowl, that's going to be things like duck, goose, swan, and also teal. So if those are types of foods that you enjoy, you can go through those different families. It's a little bit more advanced and a little bit more complicated if you're not familiar with the different food families. When I first started doing the rotation diet over a decade ago, I kept it very, very simple. So if you want to keep it simple, remember the acronym KISS, keep it simple, stupid. What you can do is rather than getting really, really in the weeds and complicated with these different food families, you can break it down into 4 simple food groups. Basically, the most common food groups that are going to be consumed in North America with regard to meat are going to be beef, chicken, fish, and pork. So what you can do is day 1, only consume beef, day 2, only consume chicken, day 3, only consume fish, and day 4, only consume pork. And whatever cuts of meat or whatever type of fish you enjoy, consume those on those specific days. It is going to make it much easier for you to do it that way as opposed to doing the different food families. But if you do want to get really specific and follow along with those different food families, then go ahead and try it that way as well. There really is no wrong or right way. As long as you are giving yourself enough time between when you consume a food to when it leaves you, then there's no right or wrong way to consume it, as long as you are giving yourself a break from the same food family. And then one final thing, aside from the food that you were consuming, is going to be your water consumption. For me personally, one of the biggest things that helped me with my ulcerative colitis was my water consumption and salt consumption. As soon as I increased my water and salt intake, I noticed that my symptoms subsided substantially. So with regard to water, how much exactly should you consume? Well, what you would want to do is half your body weight in ounces every single day. That would be a rough starting point, and that is your body weight in pounds. So if you weigh 200 pounds, half of 200 is 100. 100 ounces is how much you should be consuming if you are a 200-pound individual, which is roughly a little bit more than 3 liters of water. Now, with regard to this one over here, if you are somebody who is morbidly obese and you are very, very heavy, you don't have to go by your body weight. You could go by your lean mass instead, because if you are 500 pounds, 600 pounds, you don't need to be consuming 250 to 300 ounces of water. It would just be unrealistic and you wouldn't be able to achieve that much water. So what you would do is take your lean body mass and cut that in half, and that's how much water you would consume. Another thing with regard to water is, I already mentioned salt intake. If you are the type of person that doesn't salt your food too much, then you can add some salt to your drinking water. If you don't like to put salt in your drinking water, then you could just add salt to your food a little bit more. But what you should do if you are going to add salt to your drinking water, ideally Himalayan or Celtic sea salt is what you would want to add, and you would want to add just enough that you cannot taste the salt. If you can taste the salt in the drinking water, then you've added too much. Now, one of the other things is with regard to water consumption, there are going to be a couple things that are going to determine whether or not you need to add or subtract water from your daily routine. One of them is going to be environmental factors. If you are living somewhere where it's very hot and humid and you are sweating a lot, then you would want to consume more water than half your body weight in ounces, because that half your body weight, that is just a starting point. But if you are sweating a lot, as you perspire, you're going to be losing water and you're going to be losing electrolytes. So by consuming more water and by adding the salt in the water, that is going to help you add electrolytes into your system. Another thing is going to be physical factors. If you are very, very active, if you're doing intense training workouts and you're sweating a lot throughout your workout, again, as you perspire, you're going to be losing water, you're going to be losing electrolytes. So by incorporating more water on days where you're doing very vigorous physical activity, that would be beneficial as well. But those are just a few of the things that you could do. Elimination diet would be really, really great. Basically, in a nutshell, the elimination diet, 2 to 3 weeks, you cut out all the foods that cause triggers to your symptomology, and you would only consume foods that you know react really well to you. After those 2 to 3 weeks, if you suffer no adverse symptoms, then pick one new food every 2 to 3 days and reintroduce that new food until you have a list of foods that are really good for you and foods that react poorly to you. That's the elimination diet in a nutshell. With the rotation diet, you want to know what your colon transit time is. To do that, you could either take corn, beets, or activated charcoal, consume it with food, The first time that it shows up, mark down the date and time. The last time that it shows up, mark down the date and time. Well, however long it took from when you first consumed it to the last time that you saw it in your stool, that is going to be your colon transit time. And ideally, when doing the rotation diet, you would not want to consume a food from the same food family within the same time of your colon retention time. So if your colon retention time is 72 hours, you would not want to consume the same food family within 72 hours. And then lastly, water consumption. Half your body weight in ounces, that's how much you should have as a starting point. And then put in sea salt, Himalayan sea salt or Celtic sea salt, and just enough that you can no longer taste it. If you can taste it, then you put in too much. But that's pretty much it for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to smash that like button so I know to make more of these types of videos in the future. And if you're either new to the channel or haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, as I will be uploading new videos every single day. That's it for today's video. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.